Great, we're up and running. This week's interview is with Nick Graham. And Nick, you were in which branch?
Army.
In the Army?
Yep.
When did you join?
So I joined in 1981, much later than all the other folks you've talked to, but it was after my junior year of high school. I joined the Army National Guard.
Oh, okay.
It was a program they called Split Option. Signed up 5 days after my 17th birthday with my parents' consent. It was all part of a strategy that my dad had my whole life mapped out to where I was going to go into the Army National Guard, go to basic training one summer, the next summer after I graduated from high school, go another time, and then go into our ROTC program with college, and become an officer after my sophomore year of college. So it was a grand scheme. It didn't work out.
But now you were an officer.
I was not. I was enlisted.
Oh, okay.
I tried a couple times to go through officer programs, but for different odd reasons, I stayed enlisted the whole time I was in the military.
Okay. Serving for how long?
20 years, exactly 20 years. So I did retire from the Army.
Posted?
Started off, of course, in the National Guard. I was in Massachusetts at first, and I went to school in Georgia, Georgia Tech in Atlanta. So I was in the Georgia National Guard for 4 or 5 years, then decided to go active duty. Was at Fort Lewis, Washington for about a year. My whole real reason, one of the reasons of going to the Army was be able to go to Germany, which I was able to do after a year at Fort Lewis. Spent 8 years in Germany. That's where I met my wife. So I spent 8 years there in several different locations. Since I was there so long, deployed from there to different locations. Spent 8 years there, came back to the States in 96, spent 3 years in Birmingham, Alabama, in a program which was called AC to RC. It was part of, after Desert Storm, Desert Shield, higher-ups decided that the National Guard and Army Reserve really weren't ready to go to war. So it's a program where we integrated active duty soldiers into National Guard and Reserve units to help them be more prepared. That was a very interesting experience. 3 years in Birmingham, basically not on a military post. It was my wife and two of my stepkids' first experience of living in the United States since they were all German. So it was quite an experience doing that. I went 1 year from there to Korea without family. It was the DMZ. I heard Richard talking about being on the DMZ, and that's basically why they don't let families go with folks that are that close to the border. Came back to the States and went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri for 5 years is where I retired out of. And there I worked in what we call the schoolhouse. I worked at the engineer school at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, helping train soldiers going into the military.
That's quite a career, and you get to span the world east and west.
And some other places in between. So that was one thing that I appreciated from being in the military, was being able to see a lot of places I normally would not see. So yeah.
Now, you mentioned 8 years in Germany and meeting your wife there. I would assume that was a pleasant experience then.
Yeah, we're still married, 31 years strong. So we actually met within the first couple of weeks I got there. I was stationed in Stuttgart, Germany, which is home of Porsche or Mercedes, people may know about, and was there for 2 years. We got married after a couple of years being there. Soon after I got married, deployed to Desert Storm, Desert Shield in 1990. Spent about 6 months there. Wasn't really involved with any stuff. There was 500,000 of us, so we did mostly logistics based off of the equipment we had. And then after Desert Storm, Desert Shield, they moved me down to Karlsruhe, Germany, which was down close to the French border. Much different environment, not as industrial, more close to the Black Forest, more out the country. Was there for a couple of years, and then once again got moved one more time to Hanau, Germany, which is fairly close to Frankfurt, but we lived off post in a small town about 30 minutes away, just in a German community, which was a lot of fun too, because just going to be able to go pick up Brötchen at the local bakery and things like that was really fun to be able to do.
getting off post and actually seeing the place, you probably didn't have that kinds of experiences in Korea.
No, actually, Korea, I was fortunate because I have my brother-in-law's brother actually lived in Seoul, Korea, with his girlfriend.
Oh.
So he was kind of my guide, and I was able to get weekends off every other weekend or so. And I would go down to Seoul and spend the weekend in Seoul, Korea, with him and his Korean girlfriend at the time, and be able to see things in Seoul. So I was actually fortunate to be able to, and it was a train. You know, I took the public transportation, the train, which is great in Korea, to downtown Seoul and found my way around. I'm kind of a world traveler. I was brought up that way.
So how's your German?
Not so good anymore. Both of my adult kids, Thomas and Stephanie, both live in the States now, are American citizens. You know, I learned most of my German from them. They, with their mom, once in a while will speak German, and it's been a couple of years since I've been to Germany, but when I go back, I can get by. I can find my way around, and you know, once in a while, my wife and I go back and forth with mixed English and German just to, you know, but it's not that great.
Probably far better than mine these days. So
Could be.
I will.
Ein Bier bitte. That's the first thing you learn as a GI in Germany.
So looking back, how about best times in the service?
Best time, probably Germany. My job in the Army was what we call bridge builders, and we built two different types of bridge: a fixed bridge, which was something you put together like Lego blocks, steel or whatever. Bailey Bridge is one that some people are familiar with because it was around for years, but it's basically Lego blocks that you manually pick up and put the pieces together and put them across a gap. The other one was a float bridge, and it was pieces of bridge that you put in the water, in the river or lake or whatever, and put together and could transport traffic across on ferries or go all the way across whatever river it was and drive across it with vehicles, tanks, whatever. And when I was in Germany, they had a lot of fests in Germany. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Germany and Volksfests. And, So a lot of the breweries would have, anniversary fests, 200 years, 400 years, 500 years, 1,200 years of making beer at this brewery. And of course, they're all next to rivers, and they would have a parade on the river, and they would want us to come in and help support their parade with boats or making ferries. So it usually included a tour of the brewery and free beer and just intermingling with the German folks there, and lots of hospitality and just fun times. So that, and just being in Germany and being part of the culture, I think was probably the most fun I had, just being able to see those things. But really no bad experiences in the Army, to be honest with you. I mean, there was some tough times, no doubt, but no, I can't say anything is a bad experience. The deployments, I deployed to Desert Storm, Desert Shield, like I mentioned, and then when we went into Bosnia-Herzegovina, we actually deployed down there from Germany with all our equipment, and it was cold and wet and miserable and flooded, and cold and wet and miserable and flooded. We went through that cycle for weeks at a time. So
quite a bit different than our pictures of Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, like I said, my experience in Desert Storm, Desert Shield was fortunately not a lot of actual war like some of the kids that went second time around or however many time around Iraq, and those conflicts. It was very quick, and I wasn't anywhere near any of the action, so I was fortunate just to do the logistics piece of it.
So if you were to meet a young person today in a similar sort of position that you were in when you were thinking about joining up, any pieces of advice you'd want to pass along?
Yeah, so one of the things that one reason why I would recommend it to anybody is because I took full advantage of education opportunities. Between the GI Bill and then most soldiers, I think still today, you can do a lot of college classes while you're active duty, and the Army basically pays 100% of it. So while I was in the Army, I was able to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree while I was in the military, basically for free. So if that's, when I see soldiers today, and I ask them, what they're doing, if they're using the GI Bill, I mean, as long as you're doing the right things, sure, I had fun and I did all those stupid things that most young kids do, but at some point I realized that one of the advantages I could take of the Army was to, number one, get the experience and be around people that were great to be around, but the second part was to be able to get education for free and be able to take full advantage of that. So that was definitely an advantage. So I would say, if you have right intentions and you're able to stay out of the trouble, that I would definitely say that that's something that they should be able to do. And I'm not going to lie, when they say it helps you grow up, it definitely brings your maturity level up pretty quickly, being exposed to the type of things you're exposed to.
Before we started filming, you spoke just a little bit about your own sense of responsibility, being a self-starter, discipline, I think.
Yeah.
Looking back, do you think that the Army helped inculcate that sort of thing, or you just normally
I think
organized?
I had that to start with, but it definitely, being in that structured environment, kind of helped me realize that, if you want to get here, you have to do these things. This is the path you need to take. So that kind of helped me structure, what I have to do to accomplish certain goals. And so yeah, I think the military definitely helped me do that through some of the military schools. The military education that I got was, it's leadership, a lot of leadership, and I think that's something, whether it's through the enlisted program or officer programs, there's a lot of programs that the military does with their advanced schools that are really life skills that you can't really learn anywhere else. So, yeah.
Who was it who once said the difference between an army and a mob is discipline?
that would be accurate. I mean, they're organized and
Yeah.
do what they're supposed to do. I mean, when they say, take that building or whatever, then that's what you're supposed to do. So,
as you look back over your career, I always want to bring this back in, the religious angle back in too. As you look back over your career, do you think God had a hand in helping guide, direct you? Or were there times when you felt especially close to God during your military career?
Yeah, and more specifically, the church and the Episcopal Church, believe it or not. Every duty station I went to, I made a point of finding the local Episcopal Church when I was at Fort Lewis, and I've been back to the church since then. When I was at Fort Lewis, I found a nice church there, St. Mary's Episcopal Church. So I still have a mug that I got the last time I went, the welcome gifts to visitors, that really took care of me there. I was involved with helping the youth group. I was involved with them there. Of course, when I went to Germany, there wasn't really a lot of opportunities, but there's always chapels on post that I did a lot of. Even in basic training, you got out of Sunday mornings, you could not get yelled at by drill sergeants by going to church. So that was something that every week, people that didn't like church would go to church to get a break from the drill sergeants. But Germany, I actually went to Evangelische Church in the town next town over from when we lived in a small community. Didn't understand a lot of it, but it was music and it was in the presence of God that I enjoyed doing that. When we moved to Alabama, the St. Francis Episcopal Church, believe it or not, so our second experience with St. Francis was a church that we all went to and were heavily involved with. After that was Korea. Actually, surprisingly, there was an Anglican church cathedral near the British Embassy, where on Sundays they had an English-speaking Anglican service in the basement. And a lot of the American embassy employees and British embassy employees would go on Sunday mornings. So sometimes I went to that, and there was a chapel, part of the military base close to where I was also, where I actually helped do some of the services. It was kind of strange because it was actually an Anglican service using the 1927 prayer book. 27, is that the
28.
28? What those years?
You were close. Just 1 year.
So I did that when I was in Korea. In Missouri when we were stationed there, had to go down next town down, but it was not a church, but what's the lower level?
The mission?
Mission, and I was on the bishop's committee there, so I spent time doing that. And when we got here, that's the first thing we did is came on Good Friday when we moved to Texas, and Easter Sunday we were standing here at St. Francis. So went through a lot of things, both pre-Army and in the Army, just trying to find my way. And I think the church and God have kind of helped me stay stable and appreciate life around me and stay positive about, when you get that curveball thrown at you, to be able to, I guess the one thing I left out was Desert Storm, Desert Shield, going to church there. It'd be in a big tent, and there's either Protestant or Catholic, so it was pretty non-denominational, but just an opportunity to be thankful for what you have and hope that you can stay safe what you're doing.
So a long history. We are thankful and appreciative of your time here too. So thank you.
Well, I'm just trying to give back for what I've been given. That's all.
Want to be sure that we give you a chance too to say anything that you want to say as you reflect back on a military career. 20 years you were able to retire.
I was able to, and it's 15 years ago, which seems like yesterday, but it was a long time ago. I mean, obviously I'm a different generation than what the other folks that you've interviewed with, and I listened to all of them, like I told you previously, and I enjoyed listening to them, just hearing the different versions of the story, about the Fulda Gap, because in Germany we deployed and went and tried to do things to protect ourselves from the commies coming through the Fulda Gap, but it was interesting to hear the different stories and just to be able to tell my piece of it, of my version, which is much different from, I was fortunate. I'd say I was involved with Desert Storm, Desert Shield, so-called conflicts, but I never really was around any kind of serious danger as far as I can tell. So,
doesn't sound like you had anybody actually pick up a gun and try to shoot at you directly.
No, there was one time in Desert Storm, Desert Shield where the alarm went off and we all went out to our foxholes and stood there ready for someone to come across the berm. I don't think it was probably some kind of false alarm, and we I did see dead Iraqi soldiers. I mean, did go on missions to where I guess you would say clear bunkers or just make sure areas are still safe. We probably weren't very smart about how we did it because we were more interested in finding souvenirs and stuff like that. And when I go back and think about it, I realized that we could have been in harm's way with not really paying attention to it. No, I really do not think that I was in any serious harm's way most of the time I was in the military. So I was fortunate.
Now, I've heard stories about the DMZ in Korea as being a very high stress.
Yeah, so we were in the northern sector of Korea. I mean, we did go and visit the DMZ, and we did some training along the DMZ, but as far as, I guess it's still a live, border, and there's a reason why it's called the DMZ, but I think there's really not a lot of danger in Korea. I mean, they're still technically at war, so, or whatever we call it. There's no true peace there. It's
no resolution at this point.
No resolution at this point for how many years? 60 years now?
Yeah, something like that. 60, 70 years.
Yeah.
Well, as I always like to remind folks, we're doing these interviews not only to make sure that people can hear your story, but also so that you can hear us say thank you. That heroes come in all shapes and sizes. They don't always wear capes, but we are deeply grateful for your time and service. Thank you.
I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it, and appreciate you doing this because, like I said, I enjoy listening to the other stories and looking forward to hearing more stories from other folks.
Thanks.